What's up, everybody? Unrested back again for another Osoroshii Saturday. Today I am once again outside and out of the studio because I am back on the road looking for haunted haunts throughout Japan. I've currently been doing quite a bit of research trying to find what are the best areas that I can go find closest to my area without spending too much on transportation, although really in Japan it's not overly expensive to travel throughout this rather small country in comparison to my own Western country. I've looked into quite a few places, taken a lot of your suggestions, and something I'd like to thank you so much for is all the suggestions you guys listed in the comments below. One, though, that people did list before that they may not have already known that I checked out was Aokigahara Forest, also known as the Suicide Forest. If you are interested in seeing the Osoroshii Saturday where I went there, that was Season 1, I believe, Episode 14 or 13. Go check it back out in Season 1 of Osoroshii Saturday. I actually spent quite a bit of time there filming all different types of things, like the little bands and ropes that are tied around trees leading to places where people committed suicide. It is, of course, tastefully done. I have no bodies or horrific things on camera. I would not ever attempt defiling the dead such as that, or defiling any kind of sacred ground in which someone committed suicide. There's no point in spoiling an already very, very afflicted person with the darkest part of their life and exposing that on camera. I, of course, respectfully decline to put any kind of very graphic scenes on that. So if you're squeamish, don't worry too much. It's not overly gory or bloody or anything like that. There's nothing too graphic on there. That being said, though, today I am out and about again, packed up and on the road looking for a couple new haunts to check out and film. They won't be on the video today because I'm actually in the middle of filming this Osoroshii Saturday while being out on the road. Hence I am outside and outdoors and not in Osoroshii Studios. Anyway, today we've got quite a bit to explore. We've got some more horror in the news with a site called Haunted America, I believe is the name of it, in which a writer on that site came to Japan. She declares herself to be officially a necromancer, which is highly unusual in this 21st century that we live in. I'm a bit surprised to see that title given to someone. A necromancer who came to Japan to check out different haunted spaces and spots and locations around Japan, one that does include Aokigahara Forest. Apparently, while she was there, she was possessed by a spirit and spoke perfect Japanese. I'm actually right now currently in the middle of trying to connect with this person via either Twitter or their own vlog or blog, and possibly get an interview for a future Osoroshii Saturday. I would love to check out more about what kind of possession went on while she was in Aokigahara, because that is something I've never heard of before. Nonetheless, she has quite a few other sites listed on there, including places like, of course, Hiroshima, where often there's a lot of darkness claimed to be found, and different parts of Okinawa, which you may not know has had huge struggles in the past. If you don't know, Okinawa actually didn't used to be part of Japan. It used to be its own little country, and it has actually been attacked quite a bit from all around the world, everything from China to Taiwan to Japan itself to the Americans who stormed the beaches there, taking that as the first place of assault when they attacked Japan. Okinawa was left with pretty much no supplies by the Japanese government and left to fend for themselves, protecting the mainland while having no support. It's got a pretty dark past. I actually have a point in a very, very long time ago video where I went to Okinawa and explored these caves and bunkers that they had dug out for right before when the Americans were going to storm the beaches. And I specifically remember while I was down there getting massive headaches, and I didn't really want to say anything and complain because my wife was with me at the time, so I didn't want to mess up our trip and be like, oh, we got to go back to the hotel, I've got a bad headache. Like, she seemed to be doing okay and enjoying reading the different stuff down there because most of it is in Japanese to begin with. And then she finally said, you know what, I feel like we need to go back. And I was like, oh, what's wrong? She's like, you know, I've got a really bad headache. So we both found out we had started to get this bad headache while we were down there. And I remember when we got back to the hotel, I was like, yeah, you know, I've got this super bad headache too. It started when we went down there. And she said, well, you know, it was some kind of dark spirits or something that were affecting us, like the torment of past spirits in there, or someone who was suffering through a recreation of a crisis event. And I was like, really? How do you know this? She's like, I just really had that feeling. And she's always kind of had sort of that psychic aspect. Me, on the other hand, I'm the skeptic. I never really tend to believe much of what I research. Nonetheless, I do enjoy researching it. But my wife, on the other hand, is the science-minded woman who has a medical degree. Nonetheless, though, explains certain situations where she just kind of feels a sort of spiritual or psychic connection to things there, and that was one of those situations. Very interesting, and possibly something I'll explore future events here in Osoroshii Saturday. Nonetheless, I want to go ahead and just jump us right into today's topics right here on Osoroshii Saturday. Well, I want to start us off first with a little bit of stories from one of my friends. He had recently told me this story when he found my show. He's actually a guy who's in a doom metal band here in Japan. He had been searching around all kinds of different like scary and spooky stuff on the internet, and he was really surprised to find that I had been doing this show. He hadn't even known about it. We had talking about metal and all kinds of like death metal, black metal, and things for years, and he never knew I had this huge interest in all this kind of spiritual, ghostly, and obake, yokai, kaibutsu type stuff within Japan. And when he found the channel, he said, you know, Scott, I've got a story too of something kind of creepy that happened to me back when I used to live in the countryside of Japan. Now, he lived off on one of these really small islands. If you don't know it, Japan's got a huge scattering of small islands. I think it's somewhere around 6,000 micro islands, and he lived on one of these, and it was an island that used to be a mining town. A lot of these islands used to be mining areas, and you can actually check, you can go to places like crack.com and stuff like that, and they have these stories of these weird little mining towns that eventually everyone just up and left, like Gunma Island. There's another one where sulfur gases got released, and it was something like for 24 hours a day the inhabitants there had to wear gas masks if they wanted to survive there. It's a really creepy picture if you take a look at the town, the entire town wearing gas masks. And he didn't live in either one of these places. He didn't live in such a severe place. He actually lived in one where mining had been done, but it had long been abandoned. Kind of like the Inunaki Mura story I had told you about in the past. There is a lot of different places in Japan that used to be like that. When the train stations were built all around Japan, it was a huge rush to get a massive amount of trains built around Japan after World War II, because it was pretty much the only source of work for a lot of unemployed Japanese people as they rebuilt the nation. So they were stripping mines left and right as fast as they could to get the minerals and materials and metals to go ahead and build these tracks and these trains. And so there's a lot of stuff that was opened up and then just left totally empty afterwards. And that's what my friend was exploring one day near his house, him and his friends. I think he said he was around junior high school at the time. And my friend, who didn't want his name actually mentioned on this, we'll just give him a placeholder title of Takehiro, one of my favorite Japanese names to use for a male. And he was there in this town, he said around junior high school age, so that would be somewhere around 13 to 16. Exploring these mines around his town, and one time he said the most interesting thing that him and his friends found was one mine where you could see down to the bottom where there was areas to light oil lamps. So if you could get down there, you could possibly light these oil lamps, or at the very least bring the oil and dump it into the lamps to light them up and explore deeper into the cave. And this really, really excited them. Not only that, on top of it, they had a rope still hanging from the ceiling leading down into the actual cave itself. So to get in deeper, something they had always wanted to do, because recently they had only just gotten to go into mouths of the caves and kind of just looked just a tiny bit in, and then it was just either too pitch black or too unable to be explored because you have obstacles you can't see when it gets that dark that you may trip over. They found one right away. It was this rope just hanging down from almost near entrance to the bottom of this giant hole where they could shine flashlights down deep enough to see these oil lamps. So Takahiro, being the bravest of his friends, said he was going to be the first to go ahead and climb down there, and that was the first thing he did. He got on that rope, and he said, unfortunately, right away, like after just a few climbs down the rope, just a few notches going down on the rope, he said it had already been covered in some sort of fungus or like slippery oil type dampness that had accumulated over a long time of this rope being in the cave. And he said he had no way of holding on to this as well as he thought he could have, and slid down it right away to the bottom. And he said when he hit the bottom, he was okay. He kind of like twisted his ankle a little bit because it was a pretty far drop. But he said otherwise he was okay. But the biggest problem was the fact that to get back out would take him actually picking up like kind of large rocks and stacking them back up against the side of the walls there to get high enough to get up. And he said this took a while. It was really annoying. And he said his friends were waiting there on the edge, like kind of rooting him on, you know, saying "Gambate" and stuff like that to stack the stuff back up. And he said then, just as he finally had enough to get up there, he was really surprised because he said his friends, who had been kind of giving him the light, shining the lights down on him long enough to give him the kind of light source to allow him to stack these rocks, just took off. Now that he was finally close enough that he could like reach up and someone could grab his hand and start to pull him up, two of his friends out of the three that had come with him just took off running. They just like were screaming and took off running. And he said it seemed as though they were looking at something behind him when they did this, that they at first seemed to be looking down at him, shining the lights at him, and that something behind him was something that scared them and made them run off. Well, luckily for him, Takahiro, one of his friends was brave enough to stick around to help pull him back up, because literally, like I said, he was only high enough after stacking these boulders, which was incredibly exhausting, he said, to pretty much let his friend lean their body over with both hands and pull him up with his hands. And he said the whole time his friend did this, even though he was brave enough to stick around, he said his friend just wouldn't look him in the face while he was picking him up. He said his friend would stare over his shoulder, like behind him the whole time, just peering almost in pure horror at something he himself couldn't see. And he realized this right away, but of course his main struggle was just getting out of there. And as soon as his friend did pull him up far enough where he could get his knees on and push himself all the way up, he said his friend was just like, okay, now we run. Now we just start running. And he was just like, what? And you know, he's already super exhausted, but he said he did his best to try and run. He was all scratched up, all battered and everything. His friend got him back to his house and everything and was like, all right, look, I'm going to have to drop you off and let your mom take care of you. And he's like, well, wait, before you go, like, you know, what did you see, dude? Like, what are you looking at behind me the whole time while you're down there? And he said, well, you know, I didn't want to say anything because I knew you were already exhausted and, you know, kind of in shock and frightened. But there was this weird guy behind you who was like this old man with like a grizzly beard, and that his skin looked like it had been aged beyond years that would allow a person to live and stretched to its limits on the bones around his face. He said it was so easy to see such a good description of this guy because we were literally shining lights on his face, and that they could tell it was like a leathery type skin material because it was almost kind of reflective off the surface like tight pulled leather is. And he said there was like splattered blood on this guy's face and things like that, and that he looked like someone who had been a miner there, because he said there was still some miner equipment connected to him, like just different type of belts and stuff like that, a pickaxe on his back, like a broken headlamp, the old oil type headlamp. And he was like, well, why didn't you tell me that? He's like, well, you know, what was I supposed to do, get more frightened and then end up dropping you from shock myself? So anyway, his friend pretty much convinced him that he could head off and go home, because he said he himself wanted to recover. He had had a pretty traumatic shock, you know, seeing this thing revealed to him while he was there. So he himself headed back, and as soon as he walked in, of course, his mom was like, you know, where the hell were you? Like, why are you all battered up? He said his hands were even bloody too. He had gotten like severe rope burn on his hands from falling down there. And so for them, they were on such a small island that going to the hospital meant they literally had to like wait for a ferry to get there to get over to the other hospital, or call an emergency flight helicopter that would bring people who were in some sort of emergency medical situation over to a hospital on another island. And of course, this isn't severe enough for that, so most of the medical kind of stuff was done at home. Mothers had to stitch up their own kids and stuff like that during his time when he was a little kid. And so he said, while he was getting stitched up and stuff by his mom, she said, what did you see down there? Why did you go down there? And he said immediately after he got through the whole part of how he had fallen down there and started to tell her the little bit about what his friends had seen as far as this kind of oily skin, tight leathered faced man, he said she just stopped immediately doing any kind of like medical stuff at all, like wrapping him up, bandaging him and everything, left the room, went and got salt. And oftentimes salt is seen as something that wards away spirits in Japan. It's seen as something that can scare away bad omens and stuff like that. And he said she just started going through this ritual right away where she was putting salt on him and saying Buddhist prayers and stuff around him. And he said it burned, man. He said he couldn't believe his mom was like going nuts like this, because he said she's really compassionate, really soft person, always took really good care of him. And he's just like, what are you doing? Like, why are you suddenly doing this? And she said, you don't know, but that place is super haunted. That mine that you went to had a massive accident and tons of people were killed there. And it's been said that that place is just super full of evil, all kinds of spirits that want to keep you dragged down into the different types of holes and stuff that they got in there, and that they have it set up in a certain way, that they've actually pushed different materials and elements and parts of the cave around to make it appear as though parts of the cave are still accessible. And she's saying that like the spirits that possess that place have done this kind of stuff, that no one's actually gone in there and rearranged things like having oil lamps that would still be useful up at the front. She's saying that they've done this kind of stuff because they're trying to lure people to come in there, and that he was almost lured in there. And so he said even though it burned and even though it was really uncomfortable to have this holy salt and stuff thrown on him to purify him from these evil spirits that had come after him, he let his mom do it. He just said, I don't know whether or not I trust that 100%, that that's what people really saw, or that's what really had attacked me or lured us down into the caves, but nonetheless it was a very scary situation. Great little story there from my friend Takehiro. Okay guys, so what I'm going to do here is take a look at this exploration by Lisa Lee Harpwell, as she recently went to Aokigahara Forest and wrote a little report about what she felt there, what she saw there. This is the woman who says that she is a necromancer and is checking out this place. Aokigahara Forest, also known as the Sea of Trees, which is correct. It is the proper way that the kanji can be written. There's two different ways. One pretty much means like blue tree forest, and one pretty much means sea of trees. Is a forest that lies at the base of Mount Fuji in Japan. The caverns found in this forest are rocky, ice-covered annually. I'm not sure what part she explored, because during my time there I never actually found any caverns, but then again, Aokigahara Forest, it's massive. It's ridiculous for me to say, whoa, she found a different part than me, because the place is just gigantic. I mean, there's no way either one of us could have covered the entire location that it covers in the small amount of time that you would get to look it over, unless you were there for months and months on end exploring it each day. It is an old ancient forest reportedly haunted by many urban historical legends of strange beasts, monsters, ghosts, goblins, which add to its serious and sinister reputation. I don't know about any goblins. That's a bit strange. I've never heard goblins. The equivalent to a goblin in Japanese kaibutsu legends, I guess the closest thing you could say is stuff like kappa and God, what else? Maybe some oni, you would say, because they kind of have the mouth structure of a goblin, but they're not really goblins. I mean, goblins is a more European type mythical monster. But anyway, some in the world will tell you that it is one of the actual 7 gates to hell. I could believe that. The location is said to be haunted by demons as well as ghosts. These demons, or those that make you take your life. I found the forest to be very disturbing, and in my mind, what a hideous place or beauty of infernal hole it had been. Below is the video of actual research for a Swedish documentary about Aokigahara. Okay, well that's different. That's a totally different documentary. I did feel strange from the second I was asked by a new friend in Australia to explore and investigate the actual death-haunted forest with them. It sounds a bit strange, the death-haunted forest. But that feeling was deep in me, for something kept telling me that strange things were in store for me when I got there. There were so many suicides in the dark mountain forest that I counted over 50 or more signs that had been put up for this specific purpose, which is true. There's many signs asking you not to kill yourself or to think about your life before getting deeper into the forest and attempting suicide. Asking distraught suicidal people to seek out immediate help and not kill themselves. My guide was very frightened and would often cover their eyes in fear of seeing a real ghost. Interesting. The perfect place to die. That's how Aokigahara was described in Wataru Tsurumui's best-selling book, The Complete Manual of Suicide. A dense, dark forest bordering Mount Fuji, Aokigahara is infamous throughout Japan as a popular spot for those taking their final journey. Now, that place actually is mentioned in the Complete Manual of Suicide. Very interesting. Reportedly, the world's second most popular suicide location after San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. Very true. Due in some part to the novel Koroi Jukai, The Black Forest, which ends with the lover in the novel committing suicide in the forest. Oh, okay, from the book they're talking about, not from a name of a forest. Since the 1950s, more than 500 people have lost their lives in the forest, mostly suicides, with approximately 30 suicides counted yearly. Yeah, this is actually a common problem. In the past, I don't know if this happens as much in modern day, but in the past when very popular books would have lovers committing suicide together, there would be huge mass suicides throughout different countries. And this isn't just related only to Japan. I remember there was some famous book over in Europe where the lover who couldn't marry the woman that he wanted committed suicide, and there was a massive problem with men of that age who were trying to get married. If they couldn't get the woman they wanted, would commit suicide. So this is actually a pretty noted problem all over the world. The forest floor consists primarily of volcanic rock and is difficult to penetrate with hand tools such as picks or shovels. There are also a variety of unofficial trails that are used semi-regularly for the annual body hunt done by local volunteers who mark their search areas with plastic tape. The plastic tape is never removed, so a great deal of it litters the forest. Yeah, that's very true. Past the designated trails leading to and from known tourist attractions such as Ice Cave and Wind Cave. And these translations she's done are literal translations. Oftentimes, she's exactly right. Like a place will be called like Tanimura, which literally means like valley, village. So they often have very, very little translations. After the first kilometer into Aokigahara towards Mount Fuji, the forest is in a much more pristine state, with little to no litter and few obvious signs of human contact. In fact, there's actually very few signs of even animal contact. It gets super quiet the deeper you go in. On some occasions, humans' remains can be found in distant reaches of the forest, but these are usually several years old and consist of scattered bones and incomplete skeletons, suggesting the presence of scavenging animals. Very true. Ghost encounters of the wandering dead are said to often encounter more than just frequently, as well as many ghost photos and EVPs. That's, what is it? It's pretty much EVP. I'm forgetting the abbreviation right now, but it's when you hear voices recorded on tapes and all different types of recording devices. My personal lack of being able to speak Japanese did not stop many spooks and specters from coming in contact with me. See, here's what's cool. She actually realizes that if she went there and tried to start saying things in English to Japanese ghosts, they wouldn't understand. For many years, Japanese has been the only language spoken in Japan, and even to this day, English is very rarely spoken. It's only a handful of people who actually speak fluent native level English, so going there and trying to speak English to ghosts, no matter whether you believe in them or not, is kind of foolish. And it's something I often see on a lot of these ghost hunter shows where they go out there and they start like yelling and bullying these ghosts in English, and you're just like, you realize you're in Mexico or you're in Japan or you're not in your home country where everyone speaks English. It's kind of ridiculous. Something strange happened to me in the shadows beneath the great Mount Fuji. Yes, this is very close to Mount Fuji for those of you who don't realize where Aokigahara is on the map. I had to travel quite a distance when I went there in my own video, and it is you can literally see Mount Fuji like very close up and personal. Something that frightened me deep to my core and made me think twice about searching for anything living or dead or something else in this strange, very haunted, dark Japanese forest. A very popular myth also states that the magnetic iron deposits underground cause compasses to malfunction and travelers to get lost in the forest, never to be found again. I've heard this too. I've heard there's also like all kinds of electrical problems you can have if your equipment. I personally was able to record okay, but I remember finding out later that something like my 7 minutes on my phone were constantly behind the time. Like I was constantly 7 minutes behind the time. I was late showing up to meet my wife again by 7 minutes, and then when I went back in there to research a second time to get more footage again, my phone went back down to being 7 minutes late, which is kind of weird. But I mean that could also be like battery trouble too with your phone. So I'm not going to chalk it up to some kind of strangeness with the earth. Japan's self-defense force and the U.S. military regularly run training practices through portions of the forest, during which military-grade many lensatic compasses have been verified to function properly. Vehicle, GPS equipment, and other electronic devices function properly also. See, so for the most part, things go okay. Some locals do call it the Woods of Death or even the actual Dead's Living Hell. No one but the bored and curious seem to be attracted to the area. Well, that's not always true. There's actually the saifu hunters, which come out there and look for wallets. And it's despicable, but true nonetheless. I was really prepared for this investigation, but thought at the time that a freak show, the people near must have thought as they saw me hug a tree. Oh, so they thought she was a freak show for hugging a tree? I don't think that's that strange. My interpreter guide, Mimi, was very helpful in explaining to us carefully that the actual entire forest is also a popular place for suicides, reportedly the world's third most popular suicide location after San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge, and before installation of the luminous veil, Toronto's Bloor Street Viaduct, due in some part with the novel Kuroi Jukai. Okay, so we're back to that, talking about how this Black Forest novel made a lot of romantic lovers commit suicide together, which ends with the lovers of the novel committing suicide. Yes, we've read this. Since the 1950s, more than 500 people have lost their lives in the forest, mostly suicides, with approximately 30 suicides counted each year. In 2002, 78 bodies were found within the forest, replacing the previous record of 73 in 1998. The high rate of suicide has led officials to place signs in the forest urging those who have gone there to commit suicide to seek help and not kill themselves. The annual search consists of a small army of police volunteers and attendant journalists. Began in 1970. Yeah, there's actually a couple different documentaries on YouTube you can check out, especially the one by Vice, where the guy's job is literally to go through the forest and find people who've committed suicide or try to talk down people. I'm glad I had Mimi, our local guide, with us to tell me these important things, because I do not speak, read, or understand any Japanese whatsoever. At least she's like very upfront with that. I respect that. I really hate people who come over here, and I've seen it before, where they come here and they're like, yeah, I studied a book or two, so I speak the language, and it's like, you really don't. There used to be this one, I don't know if I would call him a J-vlogger, but there used to be this like kind of strange old guy. I forget who he was. He was from France, and he came over here and he was like, yeah, I speak perfect Japanese and I go to bars every night and pick up Japanese women. And he'd go in there and like just speak the most basic. He'd be like, watashi wa blah blah desu, and like he'd be like, okay, first of all you're speaking keigo in a non-formal setting, which is really strange. And he just looked like kind of a big goof, and you knew he had just read like the most basic books and was like bragging about how well he spoke it. I have been here 9 years. I still would not say I come anywhere close to speaking native level, and I read like crap. I'm horrible at reading, and I really respect people who come here and are just like, look, I don't understand it. I did my best I could. Perfect. Good job. The above photo is of me, and it's a ghostly image of when I was actually taken, when my body became possessed by one of the many ghosts that haunts this tangled forest of death. Oh, interesting. Here we go. Those with me, a group of 10 people, said I spoke beautiful Japanese, and my face changes to take on that of a dead man's ghost who took over my body. Okay, so this I would like to interview her about. If those of you listening right now would like to hear me interview her about this situation, let's try to get her on Twitter, or I've emailed her site. I don't know how much it's possible for her to read all the emails she gets. If she gets any kind of amount of emails that I get, then it's difficult for her to go through everything. I could easily be passed by. But if we can hit her up on Twitter, maybe she has a Facebook account, maybe there's other accounts on the internet. Once again, her name is, let's get it up here. Where was it? One second. Lisa Lee Harp and was Waugh. I may be pronouncing that totally wrong, and if I am, I apologize. But let's try to get her. Let's get in contact with her. Let's get her on Google Hangouts and do an Osoroshii Saturday where I talk to her about Aokigahara Forest and her experience. Because personally, when I went there, I attracted nothing at all. I got a kind of a sense of dread because, like I said, there's no animals and stuff out there in the deeper parts of the forest, so you get this really lonely, like, super desolate feeling. But I never got any kind of like possession or saw any kind of spirits or saw anything moving. So it says, he went on to say that I said I would kill myself again if I had to do it over again, but would use another method so I would not suffer as this person did who was possessing me. He also spoke of the many real ghosts that came to watch him die. So when she was possessed by this spirit, it spoke through her saying it would commit suicide again, and that when it went to commit suicide, multiple other ghosts that had suicided came to watch the suicide, and that if they could do it, they would do it again. So it's there with like all these other ghosts that committed suicide. It sounds super creepy. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end it right here. This has been a pretty interesting read. I think we'll get into more of some of the stuff that she's gone through here, and maybe one day I can get her on Google Hangouts. I don't know if my show is respectable enough or well-known enough or I have any kind of clout to make this happen. Perhaps this is only a pipe dream, but let's see if we can get a conference with her on Google Hangouts. I'd love to ask her more about this situation, about what she experienced, and about what darkness she felt, because I feel like some people have more of a connection to this kind of stuff. I probably don't, just because I don't believe enough, or I don't approach it with I guess I approach it with an open mind, but I'm always very, very skeptic, let's be honest. All right, guys, let me know what you thought of me reading a little bit of this stuff from her writings here on HauntedAmericanTours.com, and what you think about me interviewing her on Google Hangouts. Okay guys, for Bikini Bites today, I've got kind of a strange situation. I've got a double hit for you on a movie and a game that are connected. And it's not the Resident Evil series, the horrible, horrible Resident Evil movies, which were never made in Japan to begin with, so you can't really consider those Japanese horror. Nonetheless, this one is a very creepy but very old Japanese horror movie known only as Sweet Home. Even in Japanese, it's known as Sweet Home. And it is a strange film about a crew of filmmakers or documentary makers long before the found footage horror series ever came to light in America. This was pretty much the equivalent to that, in which they head out to a mansion known to be haunted by someone who is a very famous artist. No one has lived in the house since that artist died due to tragic circumstances, and the story behind how he died, why he died, and what had happened in that house is kind of all a mystery until they go there to research it. While they're there, certain members are possessed by the house's owner, and you start to find out certain creepy things that led to the madness of the owner, such as his own child one day wandering into the incinerator in the house and being burned alive, and the fact that his now very angry soul haunts the house, and his spirit possesses things and people that come to the house. On top of that, this video has been turned into a game known also as Sweet Home. This game is old. This game is in the days of 8-bit Mario, Famicom goodness, Nintendo 8-bit DuckTales type stuff. And you're going to say right away, well, Scott, I don't see how a game from that age could be scary, but I think some of the graphics you see me flash up on screen shows they did a pretty good job with what little they had. I have not myself gotten to ever play this game, unfortunately. It was a very, very rare thing to be able to do during the time in which I was playing 8-bit Nintendo, due to the fact that I didn't even understand how imports worked when I was about 4 or 5 years old and got my first Nintendo. Nonetheless, I researched this game after learning about and watching the movie and realized, wow, they did a pretty good job with making these 8-bit graphics pretty damn creepy. If any of you decide to get this game via an emulator and play it yourself and check it out, I would love to hear what your experience is like. And if any of you get screenshots or anything like that, don't be afraid to post it to my Twitter or my Facebook, or share it with me, or just comment in general what the experience was like playing the game. I'd love to hear about it. Anyway guys, that's enough for today on Osoroshii Saturday. I hope you enjoyed everything you saw. Look forward to me exploring some places in future Osoroshii Saturday. This has been another place your parents warned you about on the internet. Osoroshii Saturday.